Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with devilsdigest.com.
Joe, it's becoming a little repetitive. ASU continues to go out, put up some good efforts in a lot of areas and play well enough to win, but ultimately doing just enough to lose and showing that in this rebuild, perhaps they're not just quite over the hump yet to get those W's.
Kind of the nature of the season to date and maybe what we can expect for the remainder of the season. Some high spots, some encouraging things, some risks, some discouraging things, still injuries. It's kind of the summary, the synopsis of Sun Devil football this year. As we've said, as has been said by others, as has been emphasized by head coach Kenny Dillingham, this is a season where the wins and the losses hit a little differently when you don't have that postseason possibility, when you understand it is a rebuild and it's not a 5-game rebuild. It may not even be a 12-game rebuild. So you have to kind of see the forest for the trees. I'm not saying it shouldn't be frustrating because it is, but it is a different landscape of a season than pretty much we've ever seen. So there are some positives to take away from it. I don't know that it's a net positive, but here we are. Got to turn the page and look up ahead against a team that brings a lot of fanfare and a lot of razzle-dazzle into Tempe this weekend.
Yeah, ASU is going to be hosting Colorado, and all the things that go along with facing Colorado in 2023 brings along with it. A lot to discuss in this episode. We'll, of course, dive down into ASU's 24-21 loss to Cal in Berkeley, the first road trip of the year. We'll be talking to a couple of key Sun Devils. Sean the freshman offensive lineman who's pressed in a duty against Cal and might be seeing some more playing time, might be playing a critical role down the stretch here a little bit. And wide receiver Xavier Guillory looking to kind of make good on some of his camp performances and potential. He'll discuss the quarterback situation a little bit. Then we'll go behind Colorado lines and talk with Andrew Haubner, a friend of the program, a guy really dialed in to that Buffalo program a little bit. But Joe, before we do that, we might also need to dive in some news, and including a pretty lengthy injury list.
Before we jump into that, a huge shout out to our wonderful friends at Jones Auto Group. As you know by now, Jones Auto has been servicing the state of Arizona and the Sun Devil community for more than 50 years with multiple locations across the state. They are as strong as it gets when it comes to their support of Sun Devil athletics in the ASU community. Of course, you already know, highly supportive of ASU when it comes to their contributions in the NIL side of things, always have been. And that's something to love about Jones Auto Group. But that's not the only thing. If you're a Sun Devil, you're treated like family there. If you're concerned about any sort of issues, whether it's credit issues or otherwise, that might stand in your way of purchasing the vehicle of your dreams, talk to the folks at Jones Auto Group. They'll put together the best possible winning game plan for you. And if you want to see how you can possibly save money on the tax dollars that you'd otherwise spend on a new vehicle, that should get your attention. Yet another unique advantage that Jones Auto Group can discuss with you. So here's what you got to do. You want to work with the Sun Devil when you're making a huge decision like purchasing a new vehicle. So work with our guy, Parker Jones, not just owner and GM, but a third-generation Arizona State alum, and just like you, a die-hard Sun Devil fan. So here is his cell number. You got your phone in your hand if you're listening to us right now. So just take a note of this number for future use, 602-881-8998. Again, 602-881-8998. That's for Parker Jones, owner and GM. He wants to hear from you. He wants to help you out. So you can check them out online and browse their inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles at jonesautocenters.com. Jones Auto Group, Arizona's best since 1970.
All right, Joe. So the impact to ASU's depth chart isn't just limited to injuries these days. They had a mid-season declaration of the transfer portal because, of course, players are able to play in 4 games during a season and still maintaining a red shirt. And an already thin position group is getting much thinner and on both counts, I guess we should say, as we'll talk about it here in a moment. But Will Schaefer, the former product of Saguaro High School, a local kid, guy who grew up watching ASU, he announced that he is stepping away from the program, entering the portal, going to be using this red shirt, so he'll be jumping in the portal with 2 years left. That leaves just 6 scholarship linebackers left on this roster, and as we'll talk about in a moment, just 5 of those healthy at the moment. But Will Schaefer is a guy who's been around this program, made his mark on special teams, and looked like he was in position to secure a starting job this year. But with Juwan Mitchell coming in. It looked like he had some competition there. Then, of course, Mitchell was tossed out of the program. But then Tate Romney really kind of came in and established that made that starting role opposite Travion Brown his own with some stellar play as well. And just, I guess, Will just decided that at this point it was probably best for him to jump in the portal and maybe find some greener pastures.
Yeah, and it's something like you mentioned, the point at which this happened is by design, I'm sure, because of that red shirt factor. You get to the point where if you play in 4 games, that is the limit. We know this by now, so it makes sense. You've seen others across the country, not a massive influx of these, but this is a strategic thing that happens just so you could preserve a year of eligibility. That makes sense. So you certainly wish them all the best. It's something that's unfortunate to see, especially when it's a local guy, especially when it's somebody that worked his way up the depth chart, was a special teams player, worked his way into competition for a starting position. So those are the stories that you love to see, again, from a local dude. So all the best to him. You certainly hope that he finds a good fit for himself. It's unfortunate it didn't work out at Arizona State, and not just for the duration of his career, but I mean, my goodness, ASU needs linebackers right now. So that kind of is what it is. Certainly, of course, all the very best to him and his family. I know that his dad is pretty known to be a contributor on the message board at devilsdigest.com. It's cool to get that insight. So once again, all the very best to Will and his family.
Yeah, Will is a great dude. I got to know him a little bit, and just over the course of covering the program in the last few years. And yeah, I just wish him nothing but the best. And as you mentioned, Joe, this is an interesting time. And of course, it's in his best interest given the redshirt rule. But man, it just hit ASU even harder at the position of need because ASU has just 6 scholarship linebackers left. Tate Romney, as mentioned before, Caleb McCullough, who we'll talk about having perhaps his best game of his Sun Devil career. Crew Jackson, James Jonkum, and freshman Kavion Thunderbird, and Travion Brown, the heart and soul and kind of the veteran leader of this Sun Devil defense, coming over, of course, from Washington State. He unfortunately left the game against Cal, was injured. He was on crutches on the sideline. He's been ruled out already against Colorado, and his status is, in Kenny Dillingham's words, unknown. Beyond that, I will say, I guess since his status was already previously announced, given the reporting rules, I can say that he was at practice and active in terms of like coaching up the young linebackers, especially Kavion Thunderbird. Really impressive because Trey Brown is just a wealth of knowledge, but also a great leader and a great presence on this team. But his absence is going to be of significant impact to the Sun Devil defense.
Yeah, this guy that's made an impact on this team in a short period of time since he came over from Washington State. That next man up theme that we've seen at quarterback, that we've seen on the offensive line, that we may see on special teams, is happening at linebacker. So it's a challenging season to say the least, and the challenges just seem to be getting larger as opposed to getting smaller. So a lot on the plate. Kenny Dillingham and staff, like I said, it's a scenario where you wish you could have a veteran linebacker to be able to fill in the blanks if there are absences, but you got to roll with the guys that you've got. I mean, this team has learned a lot about itself, learned a lot about adversity, probably learn a lot about toughness and potentially how to overcome it. Those are difficult things to grind through. They can provide some valuable lessons, but those lessons come by way of some trials by fire for sure.
Yeah, so that means that Caleb McCullough, who's coming off of a tremendous showing against Cal, we'll dive into that in the recap section, was running with the ones along with Tate Romney. So interesting times, real going to be tests of depth. Perhaps is it a little advantageous that there's base scheme runs just 2 linebackers, but in a corresponding kind of move, Crew Jackson and Zach Bowers were 2 guys that have been elevated from the scout team to the regular team in terms of needing healthy bodies, functional guys on that for that linebacking group, and position coach AJ Cooper, defensive back Jordan Clark, who did not play against Cal. That's obviously a big loss at that nickel position, especially when his backup Mason Williams also got dinged up a little bit, and forcing the play of RJ Reagan, who missed significant time through camp with an injury of his own right. He is questionable for Colorado, and Kenny Dillingham mentioned, like, as we probably both know, Joe, Jordan Clark's the guy that, like, you kind of have to like drag him off the field. Like, he has that competitive streak of his dad Ryan in him. So you got to know that for him not to play in a key game like this in a year like this, it's something that is of note. But so we'll see, his status going forward. And of course, with ASU having a bye week next week, maybe they're getting to some extra rest and trying to get them ready for the home stretch. We'll see.
Yeah, you certainly hope that as the weeks go on, especially entering the bye, that they get more healthy and less depleted. Seems like a pretty, reasonable ask, but we'll see if that pans out to be the case. And as you mentioned, I mean, Jordan Clark, among the absolute top tier team leaders, presence in the locker room, on the field is something that's tough to match. He has meant an incredible amount to this program, so he's someone that you want and need out on the field. So hopefully that return happens, of course, sooner rather than later.
And one other negative injury note to pass along. And so obviously ASU's punting game has been under the microscope in a bad way in terms of Josh Carlson's struggles. Perhaps a reason for those struggles was revealed today by Kenny Dillingham in terms of that Josh Carlson has a foot injury, something that he has been trying to play through for a couple of weeks, but ultimately came to the coaching staff and said that, hey, my foot is dinged up. They had some tests run on it. So he is out this week in terms of a punting capacity. He will, however, remain the team's holder. Now, that does mean that ASU is going to have to choose between a couple of walk-ons in terms of who's going to be the starting punter this week against Colorado. Race Malum, who was a former Oregon transfer, was here in Tempe a season ago, and freshman kicker Ian Hershey. Both guys had reps today at Tuesday's practice. Each had some good kicks. Each had some kicks that you're maybe a little concerned. And I know some fans have already saying just let Cam Scattaboo continue to punt because he's currently tops in the conference with a 53-yard average on his one boot. But also right now it's going to be the injuries are not just limited to the lines or the defensive backs or even the quarterbacks. It's come for the punter.
Man, I honestly, for a lot of reasons, really hope that Carlson's time at ASU can, have a positive tune to it, that things can possibly rebound for him. He's a guy that, even though this is his only year at Arizona State, he loves being a Sun Devil. This means a lot to him. I'd hate for his career to be something that is limited, and in that limitation, has a lot of skepticism about it. Now, I get that it is what it is. I'm not trying to excuse anything. I mean, the numbers are very low, but very far beneath par. But once again, would love to see that for him, for the team, for all things, for that to improve over the course of the season, if that can be the case. If they're making a change that happens to be a full-time change, then obviously, you want to see some improvement there, because it impacts the team a lot. I mean, we've seen that these last couple of weeks, and especially last week at Cal. A lot of going for it on fourth down. That's not just rolling the dice and gambling and trying to be tricky and trying to have some fun in a season that has a lot of black clouds over it. It's because you just don't know how well you can trust your punter in certain circumstances. So we will see how this goes on. ASU has been pretty blessed for the last several seasons, really, with quite a few very, very good punters. Hasn't always been the case, but, there are some guys that have been first team all conference, NFL caliber punters. So ASU, once again, has had some pretty good special teams performers here.
All right.
To be able to keep that going, that would be a very good thing. So we'll see what we got out of these young kids.
So some other positive news in terms of the injury front, and I guess file this under more medical. Offensive line coach Saga Tuatele is back. He was coaching the guys out there on Tuesday's practice. Good to see him. And of course, he missed time with a medical incident, and Kenny said that he would not be allowed back until the doctors gave him full clearance. So he was out there, looked like he hadn't missed a beat. He was yelling, screaming, doing all the things that good intense O-line coaches do. And so, Stephen Miller, GA, former ASU lineman, and Matt Christensen have been kind of holding the fort down on the offensive line in his stead. But to have Saga back, that should have a nice boon for the offensive line, as well as the return to full practice by right tackle Maxi Hanachor, a guy that obviously was pressed into duty after Emmett Boley's season-ending injury. And especially in the offensive line, Joe, at this point, any guy coming back, even a guy who's perhaps as inexperienced as Max is a good sign.
Bodies on the field, bodies on the sideline. You just need as much beef for this offensive line in any capacity that you possibly can. And when we're talking about things that go beyond sports, that's obviously much more important than what happens on the field. So, whatever the medical issue may have been, it's good that things are spinning in a positive direction for the coaching staff there. So yeah, at a multitude of positions, ASU is really having to piece things together, and I think that that's something that the fans need to keep in mind. I know that patience certainly is a virtue, and in many cases it's few and far between as far as sports fans are concerned. ASU fans are no exception to that. But it's important to see the forest for the trees in this circumstance, especially when it comes to some of these personnel issues where ASU has just been absolutely marred by injuries and other personnel issues.
And one other, or actually two other notes to pass along. Running back to Carlos Brooks can say was at practice and participating today. But perhaps very notably, offensive guard Ben Coleman, who was the Cal transfer and a guy that was probably going to be an automatic plug-in start at left guard, but unfortunately had a offseason leg injury. He practiced and was going through not just drills, but some team session as well. Now, that would be a positive development, except that Kenny Dillingham also went back to say he's not anticipating him to be cleared for full contact this season. Now, it's kind of disappointing. Coleman, very talented, very experienced player for Cal, probably was aching a little bit to not face against his old team this past weekend, but perhaps that is a sign that he is in the plans for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that would be very important and is a prudent decision if it happens to be the case. Because, again, in a season like this where there isn't as much on the line as there otherwise would be, if he's coming in at best about midway through the season, if he has the ability to redshirt, get a medical redshirt, whatever the circumstances may be, and if you get him fresh for a full season, that's a net positive there. Because, again, in a year like this, you don't need to rush people back from injury. If they need to take their time and have the ability to extend their eligibility, that's a good thing. So, Brad, last week in Berkeley, ASU looked good in some regards, not so good in other regards. But if you always want to be looking good, dress to impress with gear you buy at Cactus Sports. They're located at 514 South Mill Avenue, of course, in beautiful Tempe, Arizona. You can put together the perfect Sun Devil fit from head to toe in just one stop with the best ASU merchandise around at Cactus Sports. At Cactus Sports, they are as passionate about making sure you look your Sun Devil best as they are about supporting the maroon and gold on game day. If you can't make it to the Mill Avenue location, which you should before this afternoon game that is happening this Saturday at Mountain America Stadium, get there early, get down to Cactus Sports, get your gear first. That's going to guarantee a win, I'm sure. But if you can't get there, start putting together your ultimate Sun Devil gear wish list online at cactussports.com. Go ahead and stock up, get a big list put together. It makes sense to do that, be strategic. They offer free domestic ground shipping on orders over $75. You can follow them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cactus Sports AZ. Cactus Sports, ASU alumni, owned since 1992. Think local, buy local, be local.
All right, so let's dive into ASU's 24-21 loss to Cal, a game that both you and I thought ASU would win. And based on what we saw out there, it's a game that I will contend ASU should have won, but they let this one get away, and they really just kind of shot themselves in the foot. There were some kind of shades of some late Herm era in there in terms of like the penalties that had negated some big time plays and just kind of overall execution errors that really just this kind of torpedoed any kind of effort there. This is not a great Cal team, Joe. I think we both talked about it. Just like this is a game that after the gains ASU made against USC and kind of the trend line after some dark couple weeks, things were starting to move up a little bit and proof of concept, obviously going on the road for the first time was going to be a little interesting, but overall it was a winning effort. The offense looked good. They put up a season high 430 yards, but ultimately kind of just too inconsistent on defense. They played again well enough to win, but had some lapses at some key moments and made some key mistakes that just fell short of that mark of what a team that gets these wins and what the type of team ASU wants to be. Those are the types of things that you just cannot do.
It's like we talked about last week. That USC game was the definition of a moral victory, and that's like in a good way, because I know that phrase can be used in like a sarcastic way, but we also acknowledge that there's really no foreseeable circumstance where ASU travels up to Berkeley, comes home with a loss, but the heads are held really high like they were after that USC game. A moral victory, things are trending in the right direction, people are still happy. Didn't really think that was possible, and it proved to be the case, because people are not singing the same tune after this defeat as they were after that loss to USC. Again, I know we're beating this point into the ground, into oblivion, into just complete nothingness, But this season is different. The outcomes of the games hit a little bit different than they would in a normal season with no postseason ban. A game like this, yes, that loss was very frustrating. It is, it should be, it remains that way. It'd be a little bit more so when it's a team that you're trying to creep into bowl eligibility, and this is a game that, you know, is an absolute must win in that circumstance. ASU's obviously not in that position this year. So, you know, there are some positives to take away from it. You saw some pretty solid numbers from Trenton Bourguet back in the starting lineup, thrown for 344 yards, no touchdowns, had one interception, had an incredible catch.
That was
that reception is one of the top, outside of the likes of like N'Keal Harry and Jalen Strong. That's one of the better catches I've seen in a long time at ASU.
And that's as his dad pointed out to me, like that's like 2 weeks, like shy of like a nasty, like kind of rolled ankle injury.
Yeah, exactly.
And
You throw that into the equation. Yeah, like in traffic, like that was incredibly impressive. So now you don't necessarily want to see him going, you know, leaping and stretching for those kind of catches all the time. ASU is naturally getting pretty creative on offense. But, you know, once again, the run game, a lot to be desired, 68 net yards on 29 carries. And that's without any sacks. That's a thing that kind of stands out to me in a negative way, is that, you know, the rushing numbers typically drawn down a lot if you're letting up a lot of sacks. ASU didn't have that. They averaged less than 2.5 yards per carry with the 2 touchdowns. Cal has a good rush defense. The ground game, again, to compare the two, another week of ASU getting gashed on the ground. Cal almost had 200 yards rushing. Jaden Ott 165 for him on 29 carries. So those were big difference makers as well. But you saw ASU spread the ball around. You had a handful of receivers with 3 or 4 receptions. Cam Scadaboo doing his thing. I think that we know this is going to be the Scadaboo show pretty much from this point forward.
Yeah, 59 yards rushing, but 98 receiving. That's another impressive long catch and run out of the backfield. So he continues to be a multifaceted threat for the Sun Devil offense. And of course, had a touchdown pass that was called back, in addition to the kind of connection he had with Trenton Bourguet. And that, I think, is kind of emblematic of really what ASU just they're making progress slower than perhaps, you know, we would hope after what they're showing a week ago. But just kind of like where it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, perhaps last week. I think it was kind of the inverse against Cal, because the mistakes are just really bad in terms of, I mean, there's no really kind of way to put that. That's the penalty that negated the Scadaboo to Badger touchdown pass, where it looked like, you know, they had actually iterated a little bit off the Wildcat package a little bit, because it seemed like Cal was maybe figuring that out a little bit. It made a couple of stops on short yardage runs, but coming off of a dead ball, having 12 men and the illegal substitution penalty that wiped that off in the third quarter situation, having to settle for a field goal. That is just, those are the types of plays and mistakes that losing teams make. Those are mistakes that teams that are trying to figure out how to win make. And so perhaps, you know, later in the season, we'll see ASU continue to avoid or start to avoid those mistakes and not make those errors that can diffuse and derail winning football. And it's things like Leaf Fatanu later on having a false start that negated kind of a 4th and goal, you know, near like I believe at the 2-yard line, pushing them back a little bit, forcing them into yet another field goal try. Those are just kind of the dumb mistakes and the execution errors you just cannot continue to make. But as you mentioned, Joe, I think that there were some positives to go along with those errors and those mistakes. You know, Elijah Badger, Jalen Conyers continue to be involved more and more with Kenny Dillingham as the primary play caller. Melquan Stovall had 72 yards on 4 catches. Good to see him. One of the things that I really love to see was Giovanni Sanders, after having just 2 catches over the first 4 weeks of the season, got pretty involved. 5 catches, 33 yards. Saw some time in the backfield. Had a handoff. Really nice to see the kind of creative use of him in that regard. I'd like to see Xavier Guillory get involved a little bit more, because throughout spring and fall camp saw that he's capable of a lot. But ultimately, I think, you know, you saw the offensive line, just battered as it is, continue to struggle in the trenches and not make a whole lot of hay in terms of, you know, success in the ground game.
ASU is in a tough spot right now because, you know, you want to be creative and you need to be creative. ASU is in a position, in order to be successful in any capacity on offense, they have to be kind of like weirdly creative. They have to go way outside the box because of all these injuries, because of personnel issues. They have talent there, but there are obviously areas on offense where there's a need for an influx of talent. So this team can't do much offensively if you're being very strictly conventional with what you do. Of course, there are limits to how tricky and how creative you can be and still be successful. So that's, I think, the middle ground that Kenny Dillingham needs to find. And like I said, I get it. I can feel for him in a number of ways of having the passion that he has for not only his job, but his alma mater, and wanting to do right by the Sun Devil fans, wanting to get this thing going in a positive direction, wanting to get that energy that ASU had, under Todd Graham in the years and in the era that he was here, in the capacity that he was here a handful of years ago. That doesn't come overnight. This is a major, major rebuild, unlike anything that we've probably ever seen for Sun Devil football. And again, that's tough when you want so badly for something to succeed and for something to create a positive trajectory. That does encourage you to take some risks, because there is that risk reward element to it. So, while there are a lot of fans that are displeased with the fourth down calls, and I get it, I'm not necessarily dying on the hill of defending them all. I get why you try it. I certainly get that.
Yeah, and so we talked about in the news section about Josh Carlson having a foot injury, and so perhaps that factored in, because after the game, we asked Kenny Dillingham about the issues in the punt game, and he flat out showed his frustration. He estimated that ASU lost about 60 yards total in field position due to the poor punting, and he estimates that translates to about 3 to 6 points in terms of the actual score differential, and 3-point game. Easy to see there. And so you look at just kind of the basic numbers. ASU's average drive started at the 21-yard line. Cal started at their own 41. That's pretty significant. That over the course of the game will come back to bite you. And that's exactly what happened with the Sun Devil defense, who again played pretty well, Joe. 326 yards allowed, 4.6 yards per play. Pretty solid numbers, but they just continue to have their backs to the wall in terms of some turnovers on downs. Trenton Bourget did throw a pick that kind of gave Cal another short field there. They played well in some key moments, but ultimately wore down. Jade Knott had 88 yards in the fourth quarter alone after being able to kind of, not necessarily come out there with huge back-breaking runs throughout the first three quarters. But the defense, kind of like the offense, had some bad gaffes throughout that ultimately, while they were mostly good, at some crucial moments, they had, of course, that defensive pass interference call on that 4th and 7 call late in the game. A 4th and goal, it was 4th from the 7, the bobbled snap that Sam Jackson, the 5th, had. It looks like Matus and some others perhaps had a chance to get to him. Just kind of threw the ball up for grabs, and Ed Woods was called for a DPI. Early in the third quarter, they had them backed up on a 3rd and 20 situation, allowed a conversion on that. The very next play, 21-yard touchdown pass thrown by Jackson. And I just think that, we see the kind of attrition at play here for ASU's defense continuing to. They lost some bodies. Obviously, Trey Brown was notable. Some other guys like Tate Romney, Anthony Cooper missed time throughout the course of the game. RJ Reagan, their 3rd-string nickel, had to basically finish the game. James Jonkum saw a significant amount of late game critical snaps, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I would want to see him into more action, but overall, it's just, both sides of the ball, you just see a team kind of trying to both learn how to win, but also learn about itself in the process. And that's going to make for some incongruent football.
You really got to feel for the defense. They're put in some tough positions. Now, granted, it's not as difficult and challenging of positions as was the case, say, against Fresno State with all the turnovers and the short fields and things like that. But, it's got to weigh on the defense when the offense has issues, or when the punter has issues and the defense has a short field that it didn't think it was going to have. So these are things, again, those are going to weigh on you. When you lose games, that weighs on you. When you have a game that goes in a different way than you might have thought it would, when wins are relatively tough to come by and you've got a winnable ball game that goes the other direction, these are human beings. These are 18 to 23, 24-year-old human beings. So I'm sure it's going to take a toll when a lot is being asked of you. So the defense has played, fairly well. It is kind of still a weird circumstance to where none of us would have really expected the defense to be ahead of the offense at this point in the season. We'll see how things transpire as the season goes on. But gosh, the offense needs to do a little bit more to help out the defense, as does the special teams. I'm curious if we'll see that. I'm curious if this is going to be a scenario where you just kind of ride along with a lot of fourth down attempts that can go your way, sometimes not go your way, and maybe the defense knows that this is just going to be an unconventional, unpredictable season in a lot of respects, and you just got to roll with the punches.
And two guys that deserve special mention in terms of their efforts against Cal on the defensive side of the ball: defensive tackle Deshaun Mallory, 4 tackles for loss on the day. He continues to put up be a real significant piece of the Sun Devil defense, a real big time contributor there. That's the most tackles for loss, Joe, since Tyler Johnson against UCLA during that shortened COVID season in 2020. Caleb McCullough pressed into duty, with Will Schaefer, of course, leaving the team, and then Trey Brown. He was all over the place. 7 tackles, 2 of those tackles for loss, a sack, a quarterback hurry, a pass breakup. Obviously, his best game as a Sun Devil, and he's a guy that's been around this program for a while. We've been watching him making some mark on special teams, but now with a kind of the situation at linebacker, him and Tate Romney are going to be kind of holding the line there at that second level of the D.
Yeah, he's someone that very productive high school career, one of those guys that you blink and it's like his 3rd, 4th season in the program, something like that, which is pretty wild to me. So it's good to see those things pan out. As we talked about, Will Schaefer no longer with the program, so there's a need for contributions there. Yeah, Deshaun Mallory. I mean, the 4 tackles for loss, that really stands out. My guy, Tyler Johnson. Anytime we can say his name, I'm happy with that. That's my dude right there. You saw double-digit tackles from both your safeties out there, 2 of your safeties out there, Shamar Simmons, Chris Edmonds. That's always kind of a double-edged sword when you see your defensive backs, having double-digit tackles, especially 2 of them. As you saw, Cal was able to do some things on the ground against ASU. So that's you're putting running backs in the second level in those scenarios. So again, some encouraging things, but at the end of the day, it's a frustrating loss. It is what it is. It's not, an encounter where you look at it and it's not a moral victory. It's the only way that I can sum that up. So it is a bit of getting back to the drawing board. It does put ASU in a position where, quite frankly, maybe there are some teams they can surprise, but the schedule is only going to get more difficult from Cal. Obviously, USC, a very good team, but from that Cal game, that was a winnable game. There aren't too many of them on paper remaining on the schedule. So to get some ticks in the win column, ASU is going to have to limit some of these mistakes, be a little bit more judicious in some circumstances, and play for some wins to make this season, to shine it up as best as possible, because though there's no postseason to play for, there's a big difference between winning a few more, getting them here and there, having some success over the course of the season, as opposed to if there is a lengthy drought between victories.
Yeah, I just kind of looked these last couple of weeks as like ASU taking different pieces of kind of a winning formula and trying to, put them all together. And after the USC game, I thought they were starting to get closer and putting the pieces in the right place. And after this Cal game, I think that, it took a couple off the board and maybe took a step back, but the pieces are still there. I think the pieces are on the board. And as you mentioned, I think this might serve as kind of perhaps its greatest value in terms of a learning situation, in terms of just the offense learning to kind of find a better rhythm, more consistency, a way to eliminate some of those mistakes. The defense to hopefully, even more a little bit depleted, to continue to hold up and hold the line there. And also, I think perhaps most importantly, this coaching staff, Kenny Dillingham, in terms of just the approach. He also mentioned that, the effort, especially on the offensive side, wasn't where he wants to be. And he feels that he's the tone setter in that regard. And he's correct as the head coach. So he's made a greater effort in that area. He mentioned that Tuesday's practice was perhaps the best practice they've had since he's been here. So we'll see what value that has moving forward. But I think we're seeing those pieces in place, and whether they're able to get them in the right position enough to score, maybe another victory or 2, or maybe even more down the stretch and surprise some teams, because obviously they're going to be backs against the wall. But if they can get some guys healthy, they can learn from their mistakes. And this kind of, playing with house money type of year, it could be interesting down the road, but we will see exactly how this all transpires.
Because it is still on the job training for Kenny Dillingham. Some may not want to hear that, but it is what it is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Anytime you've got a first-time head coach and added to that a young guy, that's what it's going to be. You're going to learn through trial and error. You're going to learn from mistakes. You're thrown into the fire. You're thrown into this circumstance where there are a series of disadvantages. And don't take that as an excuse, because it's not. It's an absolute fact. I would like to see the data on how many teams across the country, especially in power conferences, have started 3 different quarterbacks within the first 4 games of the season. How many of them have had the offensive line issues ASU has had? These are simple facts. If you cannot keep players healthy at those key positions, and those are not the only ones that ASU's had injuries, but if you can't keep players healthy, that's going to affect any team in the country, any team at any level of competition. So I think a big objective over the course of these remaining 7 games is going to be, what adaptations does Dillingham make? We saw an adjustment after the Fresno State game to taking greater control of the offense, and that paid off against USC, obviously, to certain measures. So as things progress, what adaptations, what changes are made? Because you can't just spend the whole season saying, screw it, it doesn't really count because there's no postseason, so we're just going to do video game stuff and do weird things all year long just to kind of have fun. I'm not implying that Dillingham would do that, but obviously, as I'm sure they are doing and will continue to do, extract the positives and the negatives and create a scenario where you can be as successful as possible. You have to take risks in this season for ASU. You have to do that. There are too many personnel issues. There are too many depth issues. There are too many talent issues in some regards to where you have to bridge the gap through some weirdness. And I'm all for it, but sometimes you just got to limit your weird. You know what I'm saying? Like, pick and choose your spots to be weird, and then that'll get you where you need to be. But I like a little bit of weird. So I'm not saying abandon the weird. Just pick and choose your spots.
All right, so the weather here in the Valley has been teasing us a little bit with some hints of fall before coming up, reminding us that it's still going to get a little hot down here, especially on game day against Colorado. But whether it's hot, whether it's more fall-like, or whether you're in a part of the country that actually gets cold, Home Field Apparel has you covered with premium licensed vintage collegiate apparel. Obviously, it's the great stuff. They're the good brand for a reason. They have an amazing 24-piece ASU collection, one of 150 plus schools that they have at homefieldapparel.com. They're even dropping some smaller schools, some love to the folks at the FCS level, like the Campbell Camels, which will be dropping on their website this Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's 7 p.m. for you folks here in the Valley. Make sure to head over to homefieldapparel.com. And when you do, if you're making your first purchase, use our special offer code SOTD23, 15% off your first purchase over at Home Field. Support the good brand, support the good folks who take care of us.
So now, Campbell University is in North Carolina, I see.
Is it?
Do they have a lot of camels in North Carolina?
I would have to assume.
There you go.
Certainly wouldn't have a mascot out of place.
Misrepresentation could never happen. Okay, so next road trip to North Carolina. I got family out there. Go see some camels. All right. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so head over, Joe. I mean, use the SOTD23. Get some on Thursday morning. Some great Campbell Camels gear. So it's obviously good stuff there. But of course, yeah, and also just get the Sparky Stomp the Bus shirt. It's one of the 5 best shirts that Home Field has amongst their hundreds of designs, and there's some absolute bangers in there, but that's just absolutely one of the best right there. Now it's time to turn our attention to a conversation with a couple of Sun Devils that are playing key roles. First up, you're going to hear from true freshman offensive lineman Sean Naaf. Played at St. John Bosco, one of the powerhouses in California, chose to become a Sun Devil, and now looking like he might be pressed into some duty. On Tuesday, he took some starting first team reps at guard. Also has experience at tackle as well. Filled in for Bram Walden when Walden was banged up a little bit against Cal on this past Saturday. But, interesting kid and a guy that has the coaching staff very intrigued about his potential. This could be a stalwart. This could be perhaps a guy that factors in heavily over the next couple of years in the trenches for the Sun Devils. And after him, had a chance to talk with wide receiver Xavier Guillory, one of the standouts, of course, in spring and fall camp. Had some moments early on, caught the big touchdown on 4th down in the season opener, but still looking for that consistency. I had a chance to talk to him about the offensive rhythm, what the situation is, the kind of the mindset coming after kind of 2 up and down games for them, and also the consistency that they'd have now at quarterback with Trenton Bourget. So getting some continued first team reps out there with the offense today. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was great. Coming in with the older guys is cool. They make it easy for me. Transition is good because they're good with communicating and letting me know little things that can help me out. So it's good. It's great.
overall, what's the last couple of weeks been like for you, just kind of in preparation? Obviously seeing the unfortunate kind of attrition with injuries on the offensive line, but also, knowing that your number's about to be called.
Yeah, no, it was, at first it was a little stressful because I was I'm playing tackle, now I'm playing guard, but I'm just embracing the moment, trusting the process, trusting what Coach T has for me, and just, like I said, just going to the older guys and then making it easy for me.
Are there any particular guys, the veterans that have really kind of helped bring you along, get you in the flow?
Oh yeah, K. Briggs, Lee Faltanu, Joey Ramos, all the guys in the room, basically, just making it easy for me. Just give me little tips, like I said, make it easy.
What was it like, just not having Coach Tuatele out there, of the last couple of weeks?
At first I was gonna be like, I thought it was gonna be a little hard, but Coach Christensen and Coach Miller made it easy for us. It felt like Coach T was still there. So yeah, it didn't feel really different at all.
And how good was it though to have him back? He still, it seemed like he was fired up as usual and still as energetic as his old self.
Yeah, it was great. I saw him yesterday morning. I was hyped for him. I was happy. Gave him a little hug. Let him know I was happy that he was back. It was great having him back.
Ultimately, going back in between, guard and tackle, as you mentioned, having that versatility. But do you feel that, it'd be easier early on in your career just to maybe kind of learn one spot, or do you feel that taking on the challenge of being versatile kind of right off the bat is something that suits you?
Yeah, I feel like I can do it. I like how I'm pretty versatile, like you said, how I can play both. Like you said, just embracing the challenge, trusting the process, just trusting what Coach T has for me, and doing what I got to do to help the team be successful.
Why was Arizona State the right place for you?
Close to home, and I had a great relationship with Coach Tuatele when he was at Fresno State. So just staying in touch with him, and it was great decision coming.
Where have you seen kind of just like kind of the collective mindset and kind of morale of the offensive line? Going through some ups and downs during the first 5 weeks of the season, some injuries, having some good performance out there, but ultimately not getting the wins that you guys want.
Yeah, the older boys, like I said, they keep the morale up, they keep us up. The young guys, whenever we're down, they tell us to keep our chin up no matter what. We have a thing called 1SB, one snap brotherhood. It's an online thing, and we're just trying to keep each other up no matter what.
All right, so looking ahead to a big game against Colorado, obviously a lot of hype behind those guys so far this season. What kind of jumps out to you about this Colorado defense, some of the things that they like to do?
They're up front, they're really strong. D-line, very, very powerful. But just focusing on what we got to do to be successful is the main thing for us, main plan for us. And yeah, they're a great team. Really excited to go out there on Saturday and play against those guys.
You got half a season of college ball, on the under the belt. What are the goals for the rest of the year? What would you like to kind of finish this year strong on?
Just get more comfortable with playing, because even though I played at Cal, I was a little nervous here and there. But yeah, just get more comfortable, and I'm trying to shoot for a Pac-12 freshman All-American. That's a big goal for me, and just help the team out as much as I can, and put us in the best position possible.
Overall, how would you kind of evaluate the offense's performance against Cal, coming off a better performance against USC a week ago?
It was an improvement. He's got to finish and capitalize on little things, and we just got to focus on the mental part. Those little mental mistakes that separate us from having a 40-point game to a 24-point game. So just a little stuff that we're working on and getting down.
How do you see kind of the offense's mentality, kind of like the collective mindset, coming off? Obviously kind of the wins aren't there, but it seems like week in, week out, there's some improvements being made.
Yeah, the mindset hasn't really changed, man. We just have the same goal. It's a process. We just got to learn a new offense and get with a quarterback, and now we got a solidified quarterback just coming in and just just develop a relationship with him, just kind of get some team offensive chemistry going.
What's it like, just having Trent back there now, kind of as the guy that rather than not having a different guy back there each and every week?
Yeah, just to build timing. I feel like this team just needs to build chemistry. It's hard for any team just to come in with a entirely new offense with a bunch of players coming in. So we did 5 games, so head into game 6, hopefully we can get some chemistry going and just build that offensive relationship.
Where do you see kind of the gains and kind of the rapport and the chemistry now that you guys have 5 games of experience, basically almost half a season kind of together now at this point?
It's just we're getting closer, man, and it's just day by day, man, just enjoying the process, and it's just something that we got to continue to build, man. Like I said, just day by day, just stacking. It's not gonna be overnight, man. It's just a process, but we're not as far as people think, man. It could be overnight turns, so we can do something really good. This program is going to be special the next coming years for sure.
Where have you seen kind of the biggest impact in terms of Kenny being more involved with the offense, taking over the play calling, and just kind of, for the first 3 games versus the last 2?
So he's just, he's trying to get the ball in his playmakers' hands, a lot of linemen down, a lot of quarterbacks down, a lot of key people down. So we're just trying our best with what we have, and he's trying. He's doing well. Like, obviously it's his offense, so we like for us too, just building that chemistry with Coach Kenny, knowing what he's going to call, and kind of getting that that relationship down, even with the head coach and the play caller now. So that's a big step moving forward.
What do you see from the Colorado defense and kind of your preparation and film study?
Yeah, so we're just gonna have to score a lot of points, man. They're a hard-playing team, man. They fly around. A lot of hungry dudes out there, so it's something that we need to go and attack.
Now, before we dive into our Know Your Enemy segment, friends and enemies alike, bring them all in to Spaghetti Shack, which by now is not just owned and operated by Sun Devils, but owned and operated by a former Sparky, the Sun Devil. Doesn't get any more ASU than that. They've got 3 locations, one of which up in the cool temperatures of Pine Top and 2 in Tempe, and which is getting cooler by the day. That's a good thing, right? That ASU location in Tempe, just about a mile from Mountain America Stadium. That one's open from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, 11 to midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. So go and get your fill of spaghetti, meatball sandwiches, and more. Mondays, it's buy one meatball, get the other free all day long. Tuesdays, they've got their famous spaghetti tacos. Catering is also available, and like all our sponsors, the Spaghetti Shack is deeply involved in giving back to the Sun Devil community and the Tempe community as a whole. So the next time you're looking for some grub, support a Sun Devil small business owned and operated by a diehard set of Sun Devils at 922 East Apache Boulevard. That's the ASU location of Spaghetti Shack. Once again, 922 East Apache Boulevard. You can find them on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Spaghetti Shack, and on Twitter at Spaghetti_Shack. Check out their menu, hours, locations, and more online at thespaghettishack.com. The Spaghetti Shack, takeout for the pasta-loving people.
Normally, we would say this is the Know Your Enemy segment. We just can't bring ourselves to use that term because we're bringing back a good friend of the program to talk some Colorado, talk some Cam Scattaboo with a guy that has covered the Pac-12 for a number of years, knows this conference inside and out, and is also very dialed into the Colorado program as well. Andrew Haubner, CBS Sacramento. Andrew, welcome back to the show.
Guys, glad for you to have me. Hope all has been well down in Sun Devil land.
So before we talk about the Buffaloes, let's get your take on one of the few bright spots for ASU right now. Brad mentioned in the open, Cam Scattaboo, player you're very familiar with, very high on. I know that when he committed to transfer to ASU, you had some positive things to say about him, of course, from his time at Sacramento State. So what's it been like to see him come up to the FBS level, to the Power 5 level, and do what he's done, especially in these last couple games for ASU?
The thing that I think is the most impressive thing about Cam is that even when we were covering him at Sacramento State, the motor was so apparent. And that, of all things, was easily going to be the most transferable thing from the FCS to FBS football, was that he always had a motor, always kept his legs chugging. He was an impossible guy to take down on first contact. And you got to figure, okay, yes, some of the line might be a little bit bigger at FBS, but some of the skill position guys will probably be around the size of the best FCS teams that he's been facing. And it's also helpful that the Big Sky is what I would argue the best conference in FCS football. So he got plenty of challenges against Montana State's, and Montana's a weirdly physical Idaho team now. And so once he jumped up to Arizona State, it was like, okay, this guy has been a fan favorite every single place he's gone, from Rio Linda High School to Sacramento State. People are going to love him at ASU because the dude just works. And it was awesome to see that USC game, especially. He started to endear himself with the fan base, I think, in a very different way. Had that game ended in different or maybe even closer circumstances than what it was, the break 2 tackles on the sideline and score play was one of the most convincing plays I've seen of, this is a guy who can play at any level. He's a guy that's going to give you best effort at any level. And that's also him. Like, that was the most Cam Scadaboo play you could possibly ask for. And it's been really cool. The city of Sacramento is behind him big time. You got a lot of Sun Devil fans here up in Sacramento in the capital region.
So now moving along to the Buffs. Since Deion Sanders was hired, he's been quite possibly the most visible figure in all of college sports. If not for Taylor Swift, maybe the most visible figure in all of sports right now in the United States. Season started off on fire, kind of dipped a little understandably when the competition got a little bit tougher in these last couple of weeks. If you look back on the time that he's been in Boulder, how would you sum the impact up that he's made on the Colorado program?
Well, much like Travis Kelce, I don't think the University of Colorado had any idea what they signed up for when they brought this very famous person into their life. Whatever returns Colorado fans thought they were going to get has just been thrown out the window. You know, I think the expectation was 3 wins, 4 wins. You get some positive juice on the recruiting trail. Maybe you get some fun on the talk shows. There is not a single alum I've talked to, single person affiliated with the program I've talked to that is not completely floored at, whoa, this is beyond anything we ever thought would happen, beyond anything we really have the capability of handling, because it's like covering a Taylor Swift. It's covering a music star. I mean, the energy on the sideline, the famous people, the credentialed amounts of media that come in are all things that people had no clue was coming. I don't think Colorado fans especially, realized the Deion fans and like the Deion only army that would show up. I went to the Nebraska game, and I mean, there's people out front hawking Deion merch that I have never seen in my life on the campus of the University of Colorado. There's guys with the Falcons Deion jerseys. There were Omegas walking CU's campus. And I was like, I've never seen, in the years and years that I've been in CU, I've never seen a black fraternity on the University of Colorado's campus. And you've got Omegas walking up and down campus. And it's awesome because it feels like, for however fleeting this moment may end up being, Colorado does feel like the center of the universe a little bit. And I know that grates on some people just because it's taken over the media landscape. But I don't think there's a Buff fan you would talk to, a Buff media person you would talk to, that expects this to go on forever. They're just happy to be relevant again after 15 years of irrelevance and 15 years, honestly, of being a laughing stock, especially in this conference.
Now, looking at some of the Louis that Deion brought with him to Boulder, Shedeur Sanders, so maybe some questions about, can he make that jump from the FCS level to the Power 5? Definitely haven't been answered that. A bona fide star in the making so far. Give our listeners a scouting report on what Shedeur Sanders brings to this offense.
I think what he brings is threefold. I think he brings an intelligence in pre-snap. He obviously knows his checks. He knows his audibles in a way that I don't think Brendan Lewis did last year. I know those are 2 very different players, but you think about the difference in starting quarterback for CU last year versus this year. He's got a much better presence pre-snap. He's got a much better understanding. Part of that's having a better offensive coordinator in Sean Lewis. But part of that is just being a better, more heady, more intelligent, more game seasoned quarterback. He is extremely accurate. I think he is able to freelance pretty well, finds his receivers well. He's got a nice deep ball, pretty good touch on it. I think the one strike on him would be, I do think he holds the ball just a little bit too long. The Sean Lewis offense, it is an offense that is trained in getting the ball out quick, because that's what he had to do at Kent State. And you see a lot of their quick hitters. I think if he doesn't see the first read, I think he kind of hangs in a little bit too long. But other than that, he's not a super heavy runner. They also know they have nobody behind him on the depth chart. So I think they try to preserve him with their design runs as much as they can. But he has advertised, and he made a really interesting comment that I think applies to Scadaboo too. To go back to the first question, they asked him, I think it was after the TCU game, what's the difference between FCS and FBS football? And he said the skill position talent is very similar. The difference is in the trenches. And I think that is an apt description of Cam. I think it's also an apt description of Shedeur and some of these Jackson State transfers that have come up. They're every bit as good as the FBS guys that they've played with. I think the big difference for Colorado is those lines are still not Power 5 lines. And the game against Oregon was the big one where you were like, yeah, there is a discrepancy here.
No, I've long been a fan of Sean Lewis. As you mentioned, the offensive coordinator, formerly the head coach at Kent State, and those offenses had some good action moments there. And now this year, it seems like there might be a little one-sided Colorado offense with a very potent passing game, with a run game that has struggled so far. Now, going out for a defense going up against the Buffs, is it just a matter of trying to limit the damage through the air, kind of given the struggles on the ground?
Yes, actually, because I think the way that you dare Colorado to beat you is by running the ball. I think an effective pass rush helps, but you keep one safety high and avoid big plays, you should be okay defensively. I mean, you've got Alex Grinch in a key situation there, running Tampa 2 and trying to play zone against a team that absolutely eats you in the 15 to 20 there in zone, and you're like, this guy's really bad at his job. That for Arizona State, I think all you have to do is if you get good pressure on Shedeur, he will be likely to give you a couple of plays where he holds the ball too long and gives you a sack. And I think the one thing you have to do is just limit those big, deep plays. There's a lot of yard after catch with this team, but if you force them to stay underneath, they're not a good enough team yet, at least, to run the ball and make you pay for 4, 5, 6 yards per play on the ground. So if you rush well and keep everything kind of underneath you, you should be okay. I mean, it was pretty astounding for USC to let them back in the game the way they did, but we've got plenty of tape on that by now.
Now, of course, the already dangerous kind of group of playmakers at Sure Sanders' disposal kind of got another name in a breakout performance last week with Amarian Miller. Who are the key names to watch in terms of the pass catchers in the Sean Lewis offense, and what are kind of the different ways that Coach Lewis likes to utilize them?
Omarion Miller's story is actually crazy given what he did. I think he had a total of 11 snaps, and or he hits the second half and just goes completely supernova against that USC team. And that was going supernova against Domani Jackson, like a 5-star #1 DB in his class, recruit for USC, one of the jewels of their recruiting classes in the last few years. And you've got this true freshman who, I mean, looks like an NFL caliber receiver against him, which is pretty amazing. Miller, I think, is going to be a guy you're going to see a lot more of. I know Coach Sanders is big on rewarding playing time for those who earn it and deserve it. And Joel Klatt mentioned that on the broadcast, saying, he challenged guys, said, if you want to play, you play this half and we'll figure it out. Jimmy Horn is the big speedster for this team. I would say he's probably their next best receiver. And then Weaver, their third guy, is statistically one of the best pass catchers in college football. I think he's top 10 in highest receiving yards this year. But they got a real 3-headed monster there. The only problem is they have a tough time in pass protection and they don't run the ball well. To me, that's the only difference between them and looking like Washington, because you've got a really good quarterback who can sling the ball. You got 3 really high-level receivers. They just have issues in protection, and they can't run when they do run into issues of kind of keeping it underneath. So those receivers, all 3, are really good. But I'm telling you, man, it's really going to come down to whether or not they can utilize Donovan Edwards, Anthony Hankerson, those running backs. You need to see them step up here if this team wants to get to 6 wins this season. And this ASU game is a huge one for Colorado to get there, because there's not a lot of wins potentially on the schedule for them if they don't get past you guys.
So another player that's a dynamic receiver, one of the most dynamic players in college football, Travis Hunter, expected to miss this week, maybe some more action beyond that as well. He's a two-way star, among the best in college football at that. How big of an absence, how much of an impact does his absence make on this team on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, if you saw that TCU game, I mean, it was clear that dude is different. There was a reasonable question even then about, is the snap count sustainable? I mean, he was over 100 snaps against TCU. If he had done that every single week, still fully being healthy, would he even have still been healthy without getting hit by Blackburn there on the sideline in the Rocky Mountain Showdown? Or would he have just picked something up along the way? Where you miss him is guarding that first receiver. You're going to miss his presence on the offensive side of the ball because he is a bit of a target monster. He's a bigger body. But with Omarion Miller's emergence, you at least have some degree of insurance there where you've got a third receiver for when you trot out some of these 3 receiver sets, some of your 13 personnel. But on the defensive side, they're still a little thin. You've seen a bit of Cormani McClain, the true freshman that was the 5-star recruit from last year's class. He played a little bit against USC there in the second half, made some nice plays. He had a good tackle against Oregon in garbage time. But he was such a lockdown dude. I mean, you watched it in that TCU game, that pick he had in the end zone on them, the instincts and the ability to jump that route. There were situations where he was out there running the route better than the receiver he was covering. And in that situation where you don't have a good pass rush, you're going to be relying on your DBs to try and guard guys. And any DB that's played college or pro will tell you, after 3 seconds, it gets real hard because at that point, you're just in a scramble trying to chase a dude down. You don't know the structure of the route anymore. Having him in there, being as good as he is, gives you at least some degree of insurance against that, because this D-line, as much as they stepped up against USC late, and maybe that portends more development going forward in the coming weeks, that's the other major deficiency. It's O-line, it's D-line. Those are the 2 places where they're getting killed.
So talking about that offensive line, I mean, these are 2 teams that have rough offensive lines, to say the very least, these squads that are going to be matched up on Saturday. For Colorado, do you think, is this something that can progress and improve over the course of the season, or is this just a matter of fact with a team that has had a major roster overhaul and did a lot of losing in the last handful of years, just doesn't have the guys at those positions yet?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there is still surface to scratch with them, because when you portal the amount that you did on the lines, it will take some time to gel. Even if those guys enroll early, even if you get them in for a whole spring, a whole summer and fall, it's going to take a while for them to get active game reps. And Joe Moore award-winning lines are built with a lot of dudes that have been playing together for 2, 3, 4 years, and are guys that are sometimes 3 and 4 year starters. So there is a degree of ceiling that I think both sides of those lines have right now. But I also believe that there is enough talent there that it's shown in spurts. And I know USC not necessarily a hallmark of phenomenal defense, but one place they do excel is in their pressure rate. Their defensive line has been very good this year. Bear Alexander has been very good this year for USC. And so to see them be able to protect a little better in the second half was definitely a degree of improvement over where they've been, and shows that, hey, maybe they might have a little bit something left there, as opposed to you guys. I feel like it's patching holes on the ship with just the amount of injuries and portal that's been going on down there.
Yeah, switching it over to the defensive side of the ball, obviously the Buffs have kind of struggled slowing teams down. But what are some of the strengths and some of the positives you've seen from the Colorado defense so far?
You know, I think the linebacking crew has gotten a little bit better. I would say the DBs have stepped up. Amarian Cooper's been a huge help there. And then Cormani McClain, man, there is something very intriguing about his development, especially as someone who stays close to Colorado, just because he was called out by Deion Sanders a couple different times in press conferences. You know, the first was, what's stopping Cormani McClain from playing? And Deion said, he is. About a week later, after the Oregon game, they say, you know, you said he's the thing in his own way. What is it that he is in his own way? And Deion gave a detailed answer, which you rarely see coaches call out their players in college football this candidly. He said, you know, showing up to practice, logging time on tape, showing up to film on time. And it seemed like the message stuck, especially with the trust to be able to throw him out there. So I think the DBs are obviously the best component of this defense. If nothing else, for me, because they are the guys that, and everyone kind of and said, I want to go play for him. That's the place where he is able to recruit the skill positions. Receiver DB really. And Jordan Dominic has been really fun on the defensive line there. He had that big tackle that sealed the game against TCU. He's had a couple nice games where he's pressured the quarterback really, really well. But it really, for me, comes down to the DBs, because as long as as long as your front seven is as deficient as they are for being a high level Pac-12 unit, you're going to have to rely on your athletes to kind of save you, which they did with Travis Hunter in that first game against TCU and have done in a couple other games up to this point. That's what's going to have to be defensively. And I will tell you guys this, Scatterbo might run for like 150 yards in this game. They are really, really bad at stopping the run. And I have a feeling with a guy who runs as hard as Cam does, he's going to frustrate a lot of those dudes because there is an anger with which that man holds a football that is going to, I think, surprise some people when they meet up with him on the field on Saturday.
It's, of course, going to be a matchup of two struggling units with that Colorado defense and ASU's offense still trying to figure out their own identity. So if you're the Buffalo or the Buffaloes DC, what kind of game plan are you drawing up to slow down the Sun Devils?
I think I'm probably going to stack the box as much as I can, only because it's still Trenton Bourguet that's going out on Saturday for ASU, correct?
Yep.
And with Bourguet, so with Trenton can throw the ball pretty well, but at the same time, I feel like where hay is being made is Kenny's play calling and dialing up some really creative stuff. So I think discipline is going to be the biggest Kenny showed at Oregon and he showed at Arizona State. He's got some really nice run play design. And, Scatterbo kind of has a little Bucky Irving in him in the way that he's sort of like this muscle hamstery, shifty guy that's really hard to take down, a lot of yards after contact for him. And so the way that I'm sure he kind of looked at how Oregon was able to dismantle Colorado on the ground, I'm sure he's probably taking some cues of how do I kind of put my own spin on this too. I think the tricky part for Colorado is you've gotten a couple weeks of tape on him taking over the reins of the offense. Kind of the biggest things. He's a really good coordinator. He's a really good play caller. And, if you were catching him the week, say USC caught him, I think they might beat Colorado pretty well, just because I think Kenny knows how to find he knows how to find a deficiency in defense. He knows how to mask deficiencies within his own. I think with a couple weeks, there might be a better chance of stopping trick plays, fun little. I think the best thing you got to do, hope that your athletes on the back end can take care of some of those receivers, because there's still some talented receivers and playmakers at ASU too.
Of course, guys like Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, Shiloh Sanders are becoming household names and stars in their own right. Who are some kind of the under the radar X factor type buffs out there that you think could play a big role in determining Saturday's outcome?
I think Jimmy Horn for sure. I love Jimmy Horn's game. He is just this speedster slot guy that has had a couple 100-yard games up to this point, but is a really nice underneath mid threat who also can take you long if you give him a degree of space. I do think the big one is Dylan Edwards is starting running back. They haven't been able to utilize him really well in the interior run game. That's more of a product of the offensive line, but they have a lot of nice little swing pass plays out to him. He does operate in space really well. He had that go-ahead touchdown against TCU in week 1. He's had some really nice plays in the ensuing weeks since. We kind of have to throw out the Oregon game a little bit just because that's kind of a burn the tape game for Colorado where they didn't really give you much. But I do think that his ability to break off a couple, whether it's going to make the difference in this one. I think we're going to see a lot of pass game from Shedeur, from his 3 receivers that I mentioned earlier, Weaver, Horn, and Amarian Miller. But Dylan Edwards and what they do with him and how they decide to utilize him, I think is going to be really important. And then the second running back behind him, Anthony Hankerson. I've loved this dude since high school. You plug in his tape from St. Thomas Aquinas in Florida, that man can go. And he's got a really nice aggressive run style. He does not stop moving his feet. He's really intense between the tackles, but it really is a concern of, can he get a degree of space that just opens to get him to the second level. He hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities to get to the second level yet, but when he has, he's run the ball extremely well. So I would say the running back room are probably my biggest X factors for this one. And then Cormani McLean, as I mentioned, not so much an X factor decides win or losing, but just because I'm really intrigued by if the second half of the USC game was instructive toward how much we're going to see of him the rest of the season, if his act is together, or if that was just kind of a one-time thing that they were just going to kind of toss him out there and bring him back.
So 3 wins in the bank for Colorado so far. Looking up ahead at the schedule, obviously you've got this game, and you've got some home games against Stanford and Arizona. Those 3 are winnable on paper for sure, and that would get you to bowl eligibility. Still a very realistic goal, but outside of that, some very challenging games in this very challenging Pac-12 conference. So when you throw that all together, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, how important is this game in Tempe for Colorado to keep things going up, keep the trajectory going in a positive direction, work their way toward bowl eligibility?
I mean, it's huge. There's not a lot of winnable games left on the schedule, to be honest with you. And, they could surprise some people as they surprised USC, even though they came up just a little short in the end there. But when you have games on your schedule that can appear winnable, you have to win them. For the narrative, I think Colorado fans don't really care. I feel like a lot of this is found money for most of the fan base up to the expectation, maybe 4-8 if you're lucky. So the idea of going 6-6 in year one, it'd be like the Flint, Michigan Mega Bowl, where like the Tropics fire off the cannon and start chanting 4th place. I mean, that's kind of the Colorado fan base energy right now, is like if you add 6-6, they'd be running in the street like remember the Titans going to state. But I think, want to see more proof of concept in winning the games that you're supposed to win. I think Colorado State was a rivalry game in which you can kind of throw it out, a lot of intensity, a lot of chippiness in that one. The Nebraska game, I think, was a big proof of concept of this was not a fluke. The Arizona State game, to me, I think the theme of the concept there is winning games that you are, I guess, favored to win. That the national media, the punditry, local pundits, fans look at your team and say, yeah, that's probably one that you should win in this respect. So if they can do that and they can take care of business and not find themselves in, a situation like they found themselves in with Colorado State, I think that is what will go a long way with the fan base, but you have to win that game. I mean, point blank, period. Deion has earned himself so much goodwill that I think it wouldn't really matter at this point, but I do think football fans are still football fans. They want to see their program win. And I think there is a defensiveness among CU fans from a lot of people that are rooting on Deion to fail because he is Deion. And so the more wins you get, the less people have to talk, the more goalposts can keep shifting. And that's better for the CU Legion that are on Twitter and having to fight the battles for Deion every single day.
Well, Andrew, as always, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always great to talk with you. And it's good stuff that this matchup's going to be continuing in the Big 12 here in the years to come.
Yeah, man, it's going to be good. I know we're going to miss our beloved stupid Conference of Champions, and we could spend an hour on that, but it's going to be cool that these matchups are going to continue. The Four Corner schools, I think, have some of the best fan energy out of anybody. So it's going to be great to keep playing these games, and going to be great that I can still stay in your life, Brad Denny. That's what's most important to me.
Absolutely. A friend of the program that we'll be talking to for years to come. Andrew, thank you.
Thanks, man.
So we're about to take a deep dive look at the Colorado Buffaloes. Before we do, we got a day game in Tempe, Arizona. So that means only one thing for your pre-game ritual, for your tailgating routine this week. You got to make a stop by Burrito Express. You're going to be tailgating out there, maybe in the morning, maybe the early afternoon, whatever it is. That is the prime time. No pun intended. Time to be eating some Burrito Express. As you know by now, BE is a family-owned business that began in 1995. The combination of authentic recipes, competitive prices, and a comfortable atmosphere makes dining with Burrito Express a unique experience. You've seen their passion all over Twitter. You've seen how incredibly active they are with a multitude of NIL deals and other ways they support Sun Devil athletics. So by now, it is very safe to say, if you're a part of the Sun Devil family, Burrito Express is a business well worth your support. And by the way, as we always tell you, and it's always true, The food there, top notch, complete fire, top tier, all the way. I'm telling you, do it every day, but especially this weekend with that day game in Tempe. Stock up on some Burrito Express. You can catch them at any one of their 6 locations in the Valley, 2 in Gilbert, 1 in Mesa, 1 in Chandler, 1 in Scottsdale, and that Tempe location that's near Rural and University, just about a half mile from Mountain America Stadium. So you can check them out on your way to the game this weekend. They are open from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. Some locations are open as early as 6 a.m. during the week, 8 to 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. That's prime time for the game day. You can get some grub there. Order online at theburritoexpress.com for pickup or delivery, and be sure to give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BurritoEXP and on TikTok at Burrito Express AZ. So the Colorado Buffaloes are coming to town.
Had never heard of them.
Never heard of them. No one's talking about them in the media or anywhere at all. Quick preview. That's all we got. See you later. My goodness, the difference a year makes with a program such as Colorado, with Deion Sanders in town now, first-year head coach, coming up from the FCS level, bringing a lot of fanfare with him. That's a major talking point. Before Taylor Swift somehow made her way into the game of football, Deion Sanders is about the most talked about guy in the game, in the sport, at just about any level, dominating the headlines, dominating social media, all of that. Divisive in a sense. It's kind of, you're either with him or against him, it seems like. That's kind of how things have gravitated. Either way is good. You know what I mean? There are some folks that love the flash. There are some folks that, obviously, for Colorado fans, it's a gift from the heavens for their program. There are folks that just simply don't always cheer for the other team. There are some folks that may not like the flash, that may just not be their thing. Either way is okay, but however you slice it, however you separate it, he's a guy that brings 1 ton of attention around him, and that figures to be the case as Colorado comes into Tempe this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's great for college football, great for the sport. Obviously, it's got a lot of people talking, bringing new fans, new interest into the sport. Now, obviously, there's always going to be detractors for anybody who gets attention for whatever reason. But the thing with Deion, and what I think makes him the kind of a one of one, is that he does obviously bring the hype and the flash that he had during his time as a player. But he's, I think, now starting to prove that he's a pretty damn good coach. He was able to turn Jackson State around and make them one of the better FCS HBCU programs. And then, of course, obviously the questions about whether he could bring that to the Power 5 level. Now, good success. I mean, from what we saw from Colorado from a year ago, and probably the majority of their time in the Pac-12, a doormat. And now they're interesting. Now they're good, or at least interesting in a good way. They're probably a few steps away from being a consistently good team. It's obviously they took care of the 3 schools that really don't have are varying levels of a pulse. But then once they've actually had some top tier conference competition, we saw that. But it's year 1, and just like Kenny Dillingham, these like foundational changes take some time. But I think there's no denying that he's a damn good coach and he's good for the sport. But your mileage is obviously going to vary in terms of your tolerance, and the media kind of pushing that narrative in itself, and whether it's that control of Colorado or the influence of Colorado. But whatever, they're having a lot of attention on them, and for some good reasons, some perhaps manufactured reasons, but ultimately that microscope's going to be landing over on Tempe. And so the ASU and the Sun Devil program under Kenny Dillingham's got a chance now. If people might be looking in to Mountain America Stadium about what's Coach Deion going to be doing on Saturday, and what's Shador going to be doing. Good opportunities to say, hey, you know what? Here's what Camp Scatterboom Company is going to do.
So Colorado, a proud program. I mean, mighty struggles with the exception of 1 year where they went to the conference title game in 2016, been a series of low points in the Pac-12 for them. But prior to that, especially like in the 90s, early 2000s, we're talking about a nationally elite program, a Heisman Trophy producing program. So again, for maybe some of the younger college football fans who weren't around or weren't paying attention to the days when Colorado was a legitimate national power, those days were there, and that's something that can possibly return. There, a lot of talking points when it comes to this Colorado program, a lot of talking points when it comes to Deion Sanders. And it is what it is. He's just someone that has always been in the center of the media attention back when he was a two-sport professional athlete in the 90s, one of the best defensive backs in the history of the game. He's always been, it's been prime time since Florida State. This is a 30 to 40 year process that is still going on. And hey, that's a great thing for him as far as his branding and the impact that he can have on his team.
It's always different. Like you guys obviously have a lot of guys who always run their mouth and talk, but a guy who can back it up with Hall of Fame caliber skills, that's what I think lends credence to him and sets him a cut above.
Yeah, and a big point that a lot of folks like to talk about, a lot of Colorado fans want to shoot down as quickly as possible, is what is the longevity going to be like specifically at Colorado? Because if he continues to do the things that he's done so far, he doesn't have to win conference championships at Colorado to stay on the radar of all the elite programs, both at the college level and even openings that may come about at the professional level. So it's going to be very interesting to monitor not only how the remainder of this season goes on, but just his entire duration at Colorado and really beyond, because openings are going to come up. He's going to be a candidate for all of the high level college openings and NFL openings. So we'll see what happens, how long he sticks around there. Again, I'm not trying to stamp a label on him of this guy is definitely going to leave. But again, if you look at it from just an objective standpoint, an outsider's standpoint, does it seem logical to think that he's there for the long haul? That remains to be seen. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to at least call that into question. It's a good thing I don't go to press conferences. Once again, I'll use this joke for not the first time this year. He might question me for not believing, but yeah. So again,
way to give him bulletin board material, Joe.
That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. Yeah, Kenny Dillingham's gonna be a little controversial. Take some risks on the field with the fourth downs. I'll be a little controversial. Take some risks here on the show. Anyhow, focusing on this game and focusing on Colorado as the opponent for Arizona State. They, of course, come into Tempe with a 3-2 record. They opened the season defeating TCU in a barn burner of a game. Obviously, TCU, the national runner-up from last season, going to the national championship game, losing to Georgia. That really got Colorado on the map. There were a lot of folks that got excited about that. Followed that up with the win against Nebraska and then a close victory over in-state rival Colorado State. That body of work got the people going, got Colorado into the top 25. There were people that were making some very big claims, very big predictions about Colorado at that time. And hey, they won the games. They went 3-0. There were some close games there. And then they were really smacked in the face when they traveled up to Eugene to play Oregon to open Pac-12 play, as they were obliterated by the Ducks. Followed that up with a game against USC at home that was trending that direction in the first maybe even 3 quarters, until Colorado really made a push in the second half last week against the Trojans. But all in all, you've got a Colorado team that's 3-2 here. Certainly has the possibility to work its way to bowl eligibility over the duration of the season, though this is a very, very difficult Pac-12 conference this season. As we heard about from Andrew, it's kind of a house money situation to where there may not be like a win total or a barometer that says you got to win this amount of games or you got to achieve this certain thing to make the season a success. I think a lot of folks are just giddy with how things have gone. But I would digress a little bit and think that, after the start that you had, after all the momentum that you had, I don't think you can go 3-0 and then, go 1-2 wins the rest of the way. I think that would still have some folks wondering, okay, is this all it's cracked up to be?
I think right now my preseason expectations for Colorado are still kind of generally in line. I thought they would be much better than they were last year. And now, granted, where they were last year, being much better is not that huge of a leap. But I do think that they've surpassed that in a regard. It was seen pretty clear they're going to be like really exciting in terms of the offense. I love Sean Lewis, their offensive coordinator, what he was able to do at Kent State. Runs an exciting brand of football, and they have some exciting playmakers. I thought that their ultimate demise was going to be in the trenches in terms of the lack of toughness and skill on the offensive and defensive lines, and so far that's panned out pretty well. They're giving up a ton of points. Now, if that 3-0 start, I thought the hype around that when they were in the top 20, I believe AP 19 or so. I think that was maybe pretty interesting in terms of they didn't perhaps voters didn't examine too closely about how that 3-0 was compiled. Obviously, TCU being a 21-point favorite in the opener was kind of ridiculous because everybody from that championship team or the championship run team was gone. That was not the same. That was not the same TCU team that faced Georgia, beat Michigan. So that was, I thought, was a little deceiving there, and that took a kind of a last-second play to win. Nebraska's terrible, and then Colorado State had to go to overtime. Colorado State not good. That's a group of 5. Granted, it is a rivalry game. We see that, but and then we've seen, of course, as Joe mentioned, some of the things. Now they're going against blow to blow against some of the actual conference elite. Now I do think that Colorado, their trajectory is very much up, and I think much greater and upward trend than I thought that they're probably going to be. You have to, I think, tip the hat. They're a really exciting, interesting, if at this point, very flawed team. So we'll see exactly, how the rest of the year pans out. I mentioned, I think right now the expectations have been raised. I mean, I thought, some people thought that getting like 3-4 wins would be great. Now I think anything less than a bowl would be kind of from what we've seen. I think that would be pretty disappointing and kind of, takes a little luster off. But it is impressive what he's been able to do in this short time in Boulder, and we'll see if he can keep that momentum going.
First off, adds fuel to the fire of my belief. No polls until after week 4.
Yes.
No preseason polls, no early season polls. Have your first poll be released after week 4. I think that would be a good thing. And the thing is, the scale slides. At the beginning of the season, just to beat TCU, I mean that was amazing. Go win your first 2 games. Wow, that's incredible. Like it was impressive more and more as things went on. If you win your first 3 games of the season, even if they're not world beaters, I mean, TCU is still a good team. Are they going to be a college football playoff team? They've already lost 2 games this year, so probably not going to make it there. Still a solid program. It's still a rivalry game against Colorado State, and Nebraska is essentially a rivalry game of sorts, although they haven't been playing every year, of course, with Colorado going back their Big 12 days. So there's merit to the things that they have done, but that does raise the expectations when you see, okay, like this team has a lot of talent, especially on offense. They can score points with the best of them. So again, this is just objective from a side view. Is 3 to 4 or 5 wins, like if they happen to go on some epic losing streak and win 1 or 2 more games over the course of this season, do you feel absolutely incredible about that? I don't think so. Are you completely dejected and saying Deion Sanders is a bust? I certainly wouldn't say that. You're going to have a lot of different media narratives. You're going to have some that give him a free pass. There are some that are going to clamp down on him pretty hard. So we'll see how things pan out for Colorado. But jumping into their personnel, the Sanders name certainly is not limited to the head coach. A few players on the team with that last name because they're his sons. Starting with Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback, he, among many others, transferred to Colorado following Deion, specifically from Jackson State. He has become statistically one of the absolute best quarterbacks in the country. There's no other way to describe it. They throw the ball a lot, and he does it well. Averages more than 350 passing yards per game, completes about 75% of his passes, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He has at least 42 pass attempts in 4 out of 5 games, and the 5th he had 33. That was in that blowout loss to Oregon. He opened the year with 510 passing yards against TCU, followed that up with 393 against Nebraska. This guy can hurt you. He's not much of a rusher. He did run for 50 net yards and a touchdown last week. Now then, we've seen the USC defense have got some holes. I think USC is going to drop a few games this year. I think that realistically, I think they're a 10-2, 9-3 team based on what I've seen. But I digress. Sanders has negative 93 net rushing yards outside of that 50-yard game that he had. Negative yardage largely due to sacks. Colorado, as we'll outline, one of the absolute worst teams in the country when it comes to protecting the quarterback. He's been sacked at least 3 times in every game, and there were a couple that were much, much worse than that. We're talking 7, 8 sack performances that Colorado has allowed. But again, putting that aside, Sanders, a highly talented quarterback, very well could be a Sunday guy sooner rather than later. He has really ignited not just the Colorado offense, but the team as a whole.
Yeah, I thought there were legitimate questions as to what kind of play we would expect from a quarterback making that jump up from the FCS to a Power 5 level, and Shedeur is just really good. And I know he's now on a bunch of NFL draft radar in terms of, prospect, whether it's this year, perhaps more likely coming out next year. And that's good because this is an offense under Sean Lewis that just passes the ball a lot, which is good because they can't run the ball. They have a bad offensive line and they're bad at running the ball, even though they have a couple of really talented backs. They're coming into this game 128th out of the 133 FBS teams this year, and yards per carry, just a shade over 2.5 yards every time they run the ball. Only 5 teams are worse. Now, of course, the sacks figure into that, but even the sack adjusted totals still not good. But with Shedeur being the trigger man there, he's really good, and he is as Colorado has liked to kind of promote there. He saved some of his best play for late in games. He's the national leader in second half overtime passing yards, over 1,211 touchdowns in that context. Fourth quarter, he has 582 passing yards so far this season. That's great, but also kind of, in context, because, just kind of gross numbers sometimes can be a little misleading. That, the context is that the defense is pretty bad. They've been in some shootouts. They've needed those points, or in case of perhaps last week, USC might have taken the foot off the gas a little bit too much, and also the Alex Grinch defense, as Joe alluded to.
Yeah. Like I said, USC, I think I'm kind of calling. I think I might shift because didn't I pick Oregon over USC in the Pac-12 championship game?
Something like that. I had UW as one of the conference.
I'm getting close to Washington's been great, and there's no reason to doubt them. I just like to kind of be weird and maybe pick someone that's off the level, but Washington's kind of for real. I'm still on the Oregon train. I think they're an impressive
Wazoo, let's go all in on Cougs.
You know what? Whatever.
Stick it to the man.
I got no problem with that. So talking about the running backs that Brad gave such a wonderful introduction for. Dylan Edwards, true freshman, doing some things. 201 yards on the ground, 1 touchdown. He's got 17 receptions and 3 touchdowns. Yeah. However, he had 135 receiving yards and 3 touchdown catches in the opener. Since then, only 34 yards on 12 catches with no scores. Anthony Hankerson, it's his second year in the program. You don't have a lot of guys that are contributing at a high level that have been in this program for more than a few games. He's one of them. 156 yards, 1 touchdown. Another name that ASU fans who really followed the recruiting game probably remember, Alton McCaskill from Houston, a transfer that ASU was on the short list for. He's a guy that rushed for nearly 1,000 yards for Houston in 2021. I believe he missed last year due to injury. He's only played 2 games this year, 6 carries for 22 yards. However, those 2 games are the most recent 2 games. So we'll see if he factors in at all there. So, there's some guys that can get things done to an extent, some versatility, as we saw with Edwards, especially in the opener. But yet again, the rushing numbers simply are not there. And when you're 5 games deep into the season, gonna get to the point where you are what you are.
Yeah, the offensive line continues to be bad. Obviously ASU fans can know what struggles in the trenches can do for an offense, even though you might have exciting playmakers. Edwards is a guy who's a 4-star back coming out of high school, and he had shows off the explosiveness. He's a guy you can't let get into space because he can hurt you as a defense. But that offensive line has just really not been able to get this ground game going. They did rush for 193 yards last week against USC, again with the Grinch caveat, but every other game failing to top 70 yards total as a team in the rushing department. And this is an offensive line that gives up a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. Joe mentioned the sack numbers, 127th, and tackles for loss allowed. And this is I'm really curious to see what kind of game plan ASU DC Brian Ward is able to dial up, because they've had some struggles stopping the run, but they were kind of good for 3 quarters last week, but ultimately they just kind of wore down as the game went on against Cal. And this is a one-dimensional offense. They make no bones about it. But one thing you cannot do if you're the Sun Devils is allow them to find some consistency on the ground and kind of become multifaceted. You want to continue to put the game on the shoulders of Shedeur, get your pass rushers and Prince Dorbah, BJ Green, Clayton Smith is back and looking good, letting them kind of, pin their ears back and getting after Shedeur, a guy who holds the ball a little bit too long at times, as Andrew Haubner told you guys. That's the key for, I think, a Sun Devil win, to kind of keep that explosive Colorado offense somewhat in check.
Few teams in the country capitalized on the transfer portal as significantly as Colorado did this offseason. That's evident pretty much across the board for them. Certainly at the pass catching positions at wide receiver, 4 of their top 6 pass catchers came from the portal this past offseason, starting with Xavier Weaver coming in from South Florida, ranks 14th nationally, averaging 98 receiving yards per game. He's third in the Pac-12 in that category. He has 41 catches for 490 yards and 2 touchdowns in 5 games. Jimmy Horn Jr. followed him along, also from USF, 34 catches for 327 yards, 4 touchdowns. He has had at least 7 catches in 4 out of 5 games, only had 1 reception against Oregon. A name that you will not be seeing out there, according to reports from earlier this week, Travis Hunter, the all-purpose superstar for Colorado, a guy who's probably going to be a very, very high NFL draft pick in, I guess, what would be the 2025 draft, since he is a true sophomore. Travis Hunter had 16 catches for 213 yards in the 3 games he has played. According to reports, he's still about 2 to 3 weeks away from returning. Also a dynamic defensive back, a critical interception that he had against TCU. He's someone that had been playing 100+ snaps per game, just being the heart and soul and brain and bones and organs of this Colorado team. So he is sidelined for a little bit. Obviously, the increase in competition has been a factor, but not having him on the field certainly has hurt this team these last couple of weeks.
They also like to utilize the tight end, something that hasn't been done too often with Colorado in recent years, and or even just in kind of the Sean Lewis offenses in general. Michael Harrison's also a factor, 20 catches on the season, but that's a very potent group of wide receivers that ASU's defensive backs are going to have to contend with. And if Jordan Clark's not able to play in another game, and if Mason Williams isn't able to kind of get back to full health as Clark's number 2, could be a interesting matchup, especially with Jimmy Horn coming out of that slot position.
A name that you might need to keep in mind, who just absolutely burst upon the scene last week, Omarion Miller, true freshman. He's played in 3 games this year, but prior to last week didn't have a catch registered until he had 7 receptions for 196 yards and a touchdown against the Trojans. You talked about the tight end position. Michael Harrison, 20 catches, 179 yards with 4 scores. Tavarish Dawson, he came over from Auburn, yet another transfer portal addition. He's got 14 catches for 124 yards and a score. So they're moving the ball around. You've got a lot of guys that are touching the ball, a lot of guys that are catching the ball, not just at receiver, running backs, tight ends. So a lot of different threats. This is not one of those deals where if you just lock down the top guy and find a way to do that, that you're probably going to be okay. They've got a handful of talented skill players that can hurt you.
It's going to be very interesting to see what kind of game plan Brian Ward dials up, because this is an offense that can put points on the board, and they've needed all those points on the board to stay competitive because, Joe, the defense is really bad. They're running a 3-3-5 base, and again, it just kind of seems like every week the ASU is playing a team that's run out of a base 5 defensive back scheme. But whether it's on the ground or through the air, they really don't do a whole lot well other than generating turnovers. They are 3rd in the country in generating and having generated 12 turnovers. But you look at just all the key areas in terms of yards per play, yards per carry rating, red zone, 3rd down, all not good. So they've needed every single point that this offense has been able to generate.
And the last bullet point about the offense before we flip over to the defense, you talked about a lot of problems with the offensive line. I mean, ASU, of course, has had its share of offensive line woes. Colorado, similar boat there. They have allowed 26 sacks, 5 games. That's over 5 sacks per game that they allow. Next to last nationally behind Old Dominion. They are 125th out of 130 teams, allowing 8.4 tackles for loss per game. You talked about the issues on the ground, 2.6 yards per carry, 83.2 yards per game. Dead last nationally in some rush offense categories. They had 193 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns last week against USC. That's a dang good game. They're still that bad. Despite that, only had 223 rushing yards over those first 4 games. You do the math, that's barely 55 net yards per game. As we've talked about, the sacks chip away at that quite a bit when you're allowing 3 and in some cases 7 or 8 sacks per game, but the numbers aren't there from the running backs either. So a one-dimensional team. They do that dimension well, but a one-dimensional team. So if there's an opportunity to fluster Sanders in the backfield, to get some hits on him, to get some sacks on him, then that could potentially slow down this offense. But that is something you need to do, because if you give him time to operate, he'll pick and choose his spots, and he'll find any number of these talented pass catchers that he has.
ASU is just a handful of sacks away from matching last year's total. This pass rush has really been impressive. And, with Brian Ward's chaotic scheme and the success of guys like BJ Green and Prince Dorbah especially has been a nice bastion of hope in terms of revitalizing this pass rush to what it was 3-4 years ago. Even just guys cutting after him from the defensive backfield in terms of complicated looks. So this is going to be an offense that's going to be throwing a lot of quick stuff, a lot of short game, and kind of with the explosive playmakers and the athleticism that this group of pass catchers has, making those stops in the open field and making sure that the yards after the catch are not too critical and hurting them over the course of the game. It's going to be paramount. I think it's going to be a real interesting battle because ASU secondary, talked about it all offseason long, I think is one of the strengths of this team. Even a little dinged up if Jordan Clark's not able to go. There's still a lot of very talented DBs that I think are going to have their hands full, but I think it's going to be a good, even matchup.
So flipping over to the Colorado defense, if you hear a name out there making tackles that sounds a little bit familiar, it's that guy that was in the program for a small cup of coffee and chose to put together a series of attitude issues, berating people on the staff. That's never a good look for anyone. When you bounce around, 4 or 5 different college football programs, brother, that's a you problem. That's nobody else but you. I'm talking about Juwan Mitchell. He's the leading tackler for Colorado. He has 31 tacklers. He's among the team leaders with 2.5 TFLs. An imbalanced performance this year. He had 15 tackles against Colorado State, 10 against Oregon, but only 6 across the other 3 games of the year. He might enter this game with a chip on his shoulder, but I would reckon a lot of the Sun Devils do too. So it's going to be interesting when you see some guys, whether it's on the offensive line, whether it's a running back like Cam Scadaboo or others, when they see him on the field, be interesting to see how those encounters go.
Yeah, this is a defense that, he's the leading tackler so far this year, but 3 out of the 5 top tacklers are DBs, and they're giving up a lot of yards, Joe, and they're giving up a lot of points. They're giving them a lot of yards per play, 123rd in the country in just the overall yards per play metric. That's not good. Just whether it's through the air or on the ground, the offenses are having their way. Now they've played some good offenses. Oregon's pretty good. USC is elite. They've also played some not great offenses and they've still had some issues there as well. ASU's offense is continuing to try to find any kind of identity and any kind of consistency, especially with their struggles on the line. But this is a defensive unit, especially on the ground with ASU wanting to kind of reestablish themselves with the run game of Cam Scadaboo. I think that this is a week that you need to make some strides. Take this opportunity, especially playing at home.
Other key performers on defense for Colorado, Jordan Dominic leads the team with 6.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. He is a transfer from Arkansas. Cameron Silman Craig leads the squad with 3 interceptions. He's a safety, one of a multitude of transfers from Jackson State, of course, following Deion Sanders from his previous coaching stop. So like you talked about, I mean, it's fairly simple in nature when it comes to this team. This is a team that has a very talented quarterback, talented targets for him to throw to, a powerful pass game, but massive issues on the O-line, massive issues when it comes to the run game, and significant issues on defense as well. They aim to air it out and have been successful on a few occasions, of course, with their 3 wins this season. But if you got an offense that can go toe-to-toe with them, then that's a challenging thing. Now then, where does that put ASU? Because they have not been a gangbuster offense by any definition, but it could be an opportunity for the offense to improve a little bit, to make some plays, because that Colorado defense has allowed a lot of teams to do the same, whether that's top 10 caliber teams like Oregon and USC, or teams like in Nebraska or Colorado State that are going to fall far from that sort of achievement this season. So I feel like I say this every week, but I think like this game is going to prove a lot for both teams. So before we jump into the keys for this ball game, if you're a Sun Devil fan, it's an important key to your life to be a subscriber on devilsdigest.com. Get in the huddle there, get involved with those discussions, get all the information out of the practice reports, the game coverage, all the incredible stuff that Hode Rubino, our guy, and the rest of the staff, a little bit including me, tend to do on a very regular basis. I know that it's tough times. Season's not going as folks had hoped. I know that ASU is in a difficult spot right now, but it's still important to be in the know. If you're a true Sun Devil supporter, you got to support that through thick or thin, and being a member at devilsdigest.com is the best way to get that done. Obviously, this school year is moving along. Basketball season is starting up here in less than a month. Other sports as well that are going to be going on through the duration of this school year. You want to get the most, you want to get the best, get a subscription to rivals.com, devilsdigest.com. Doing so, again, you also get some premium content, access to it across the Rivals.com network, which is as good as it gets. So for true Sun Devil fans, get logged on, get subscribed, get in the huddle of devilsdigest.com. All right, Brad, key number 1, what'll it be?
All right, this is a team in Colorado that is one-dimensional, and I need to see ASU make sure they stay that way. Don't let them get the ground game going because they know that they're going to be passing the ball a lot. Shedeur is going to be throwing and throwing and throwing. What you don't want to have to worry about is them running as well because they do have some talented backs in Edwards and Hankerson. They just haven't had a whole lot of success, especially behind that offensive line. So ASU's had some issues. USC gashed them heavily a couple weeks ago, and ASU's front seven especially wore down and really kind of gave things up to Jaden Knott in the fourth quarter a week ago. Hopefully there's a better effort there, even with Trey Brown being out of there. We've seen Deshaun Mallory play a key role at defensive tackle, but overall, stopping the run's a whole defensive issue. So getting after it, making sure that they stay a one-dimensional offense. So if you're able to kind of keep making sure that they're going to continue pass, then you can get your pass rushers going. I do like those. If that's the case, I do like that event, that matchup there in ASU's favor, but still have some questions on this run defense after what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, the season started off well in that regard against the run, but the last 2 weeks really have taken a nosedive. We saw last year where ASU just got taken out of some winnable games by way of how its run defense was gashed. So that needs to be something that does not fall apart this week. I agree with that. My first key in a similar type of vein is getting to the quarterback. Or this Colorado offensive line allows a ton of sacks. They have had 7-8 sack games allowed on multiple occasions this year through 5 games. They're among the poorest teams in the country at protecting the quarterback. So I'm not saying like 1 or 2 sacks. I'm saying like 5+. You need to see those guys get into action. ASU has shown flashes of that this season. We didn't see it barely at all last year, even through the early stretches of the year. But ASU has proven it can get to the quarterback. And that's going to be an absolute must because you're very likely, unless Colorado goes with a game plan of we're going to kind of go against script because ASU is not so good against the run. If they don't, unless they do that, you're going to probably see 40+ pass attempts. So a lot of opportunities for ASU to wreak havoc against an offense that has allowed a lot of teams to do some stuff against them.
Yeah. So number 2 on the similar line, the ball's going to be in the air a lot. Catch one of them. Just get a turnover. ASU has not done that. They've done well, I think, in making plays behind the line of scrimmage and sacks and tackles for loss. They've played well enough for ASU to win pretty much every game so far this season, just not getting a whole lot of help from the offense, as we've talked about. There's a certain point where you can bend and not break and force teams into field goals and play well after your offense turns it over. But you need to start making those game-breaking type of plays. You need to be making those get those turnovers. We've seen them, like D4 dropped a pick last week, and just not the inability to create fumbles and recover fumbles. ASU needs to start getting these turnovers and kind of correlating and translating those sacks and TFLs and those quarterback pressures and hurries and such into mistakes that lead to possessions. And ASU, with their offense, kind of struggling, trying to continue to find its way, getting them some additional possessions is going to go a long way on that front. So with that chaos that Brian Ward brings, hopefully they can start getting some of those turnovers.
When the Sun Devils have the ball, I want to see them running. I think we know by now that Cam Scadaboo is the guy. He's going to be used in a multitude of ways and might carry this team through the remainder of the year. This is a game where he can really go off. I mean, he did incredible things against USC, had a very good game against Cal. This is another opportunity for him to really gash a defense. You saw him. He was kind of the darling of college football for that late night, Pac-12 after dark action against USC. You can see some more of that. I think they lean heavily upon him. It seems like it's a foregone conclusion. So calling it a key is something that just seems like, well, no duh. Of course they're gonna use him a lot. But using him creatively in a responsible way is important. Just kind of do a lot of the things you did against USC, and you can have quite a bit of success on offense and get a big day for Cam.
So on a similar note, my third key is to just use the run game to control the clock and control the tempo, because Colorado's offense is very potent, as we've talked about. Best way to keep them in check is to keep them the hell on the sidelines. Whether it's Cam Scadaboo, we saw DeCarlos Brooks participate in practice, so perhaps he might be available to get back because he has a nice, hard, physical runner over the first couple weeks of the season. And whether it is, getting more creative. Kenny Dillingham talked about having to use more misdirection, motion shifts, be more creative overall in terms of, the scheming out the run game for this Sun Devil offense. And, obviously with the issues along the offensive line, there's going to be some challenges there in the trenches. So figuring out ways to be more creative in the run game and kind of maybe iterating off the Wildcat package instead of, because I think, we saw at Oklahoma State, even at times Cal, kind of figuring that out a little bit in terms of shutting down. So be more creative, whether it is Scadaboo. Kyson Brown could see some more action. Tevin White is a guy that Kenny Dillingham has said they want to get more involved. Javen Jacobs presents a kind of like X factor, that versatility that can be used in terms of some creative run situations, as well as any of your very explosive wide receivers. But just run the clock, be more judicious, I think, on your fourth down decisions, but to pick up drives, but just continue to convert on third down, get yourself having some good, smart play calling in the early downs, so you're not facing 3rd and 7+ all the time, but just run the game, control clock, so you can control tempo and keep the Buffs offense on the sideline.
One thing that you mentioned there is my third key. Don't fully abandon the weird, but be intelligent with the weird. What I mean by that, of course, the fourth downs, the 2-point conversions, things like that. I don't think that you necessarily need to completely throw that part of the playbook out. You just got to be smart with it. You got to be judicious with it. I don't have a problem with this team taking a lot of risks this year, but you might have to tone it down just a little bit, especially if you get to a point where, it's a winnable game, because that's what you've had these last 2 weeks are games that ASU is either in the thick of things or actually in control deep into the game, but both of them have panned out to be losses. That didn't sting quite as much against USC as it did against Cal, but at the end of the day, you look back at those games and there are opportunities where both of them could have been victories. And we're looking at a much different thing if you're talking about ASU being a 2-3 or much less a 3-2 team at this point versus 1-4. So you want to see them take some risks, take some chances, but you got to be smart with it, because when you have a high-powered offense like Colorado, if you take too many risks and if you fail in some important circumstances and you give them the ball with a relatively short field, that's how the game can get away from you in a hurry, because they can eat up big chunks of yardage. They're a big play team. They've had several plays over the course of this season, several scoring plays that are very long distance. So you got to be smart with that. But like I said, I don't want to see the scale tilted the total other direction to where it's an overly conservative team. So you got to find that middle ground. And a big thing we'll see that factors into that is what they're going to do at punter, because you get the impression it's not going to be Josh Carlson, and beyond that, it's a complete unknown. So that's going to be a thing. If you trot out a new punter on the first attempt, he shanks it for 25 yards, that might change your game plan a little bit. So again, they got to roll with the punches, moderate the weird a little bit, but I still want to see some weird.
All right, time for predictions. I'll start things off. I think that this is another game where ASU's offense is going to kind of take some steps forward. I think Kenny Dillingham has learned some valuable lessons and gotten to know his kind of short-handed team, especially, kind of calling a game in terms of having some limitations in the trenches, and then the offensive line. There's probably going to be some more reshuffling in terms of, what we'll see from that group up front. But there are some very potent playmakers. As mentioned earlier, love seeing that Badger, Conyer, Stovall, Sanders, those guys getting more involved. Of course, a guy like Xavier Guillory is very talented, could be another component as well. Not to mention, of course, folk hero Cam Scadaboo out of the backfield and what's there. I do think the offense against that defense is going to be able to get things going. I just haven't seen them have the consistency enough over time to, whether it is making some self mistakes or just the execution side of things, that they're going to be able to score enough to keep up with the high-powered Buffalo offense or the Buffalo's offense. Colorado's really good in terms of what they're able to do in the past, and I do think that while ASU's pass rush is going to be able to make some big plays, I do think Colorado's going to get theirs. It's kind of one of, they're not necessarily or not in the category of a USC where it's just a matter of kind of limiting, but I do think over the course of a game, ASU's defense, kind of the personnel situation they are, I think they might start strong. It might be really close through 3 quarters again, but I just think that ASU has shown a tendency to kind of wear down the physicality and the kind of the limitations of this roster and the current, kind of health status overall, top to bottom. So in the end, I think it's going to be a very fun, a very competitive game. ASU will have a chance to win, and they might, but I don't think they will. Then Colorado escapes with a 31-27 win.
By no means is this an unwinnable game. I know that obviously there's the hype train is still running 1,000 miles an hour. This is a game that ASU can win. I'm very eager to see the mental state of both teams, but specifically Colorado in this game. Are they going to be chomping at the bit to get out there, to get back in the win column? That their pride's been damaged a little bit the last 2 weeks compared to the first 3 weeks. Are they focused given those circumstances that, okay, for the first 3 games, they were the talk of town. Everybody was deeply in love with them. Or if they didn't, they were just kind of jealous. And I'll admit, I might fall into that category in that period of time. Last 2 games, it's been a different story altogether. Embarrassing loss at Colorado in a game that looked a lot better than maybe it really was against USC. So are they going to have that focus? Will Colorado have that focus? Or are things going to start to fray? Is this a team that maybe thought that it had some high level potential and aspirations that are now getting struck down a little bit by 2 conference losses, 2 regular season losses? Is this the team that, truly believed it had conference championship or higher potential? Or is it a team that maybe echoes its fan base a little bit, knowing that this is a 1-win team from a year ago? So you've already done tremendous progress, and you can still pick up some wins along the way to make it a bowl season, which would be a massive accomplishment, all things considered. So I'm just kind of eager to see what sort of presence Colorado has in this game. I think this is one that ASU can stay with them for a great bit of time. I'm just concerned about the firepower of Colorado's offense that, they can rip off 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns with relative ease that can break the back of any opponent. And that's a momentum swing that can happen in a hurry that they can do. I'm concerned about ASU being able to protect the ball, both in terms of avoiding turnovers and turnovers on downs. And I think that those things have been happening. And so until you see it not happen, you have to be concerned that it's going to continue. So my concern is that these 2 teams can go toe-to-toe for a good chunk of the game, and then a couple plays in the wrong direction, ASU turning the ball over, or a faulty 4th down call, around midfield, and then, a deep pass later, it's 7 points on the board for Colorado. Those sort of things concern me. So while I acknowledge and agree that this is a game that ASU could win under the right circumstances, just haven't seen enough consistency, especially on the offense, in order to predict that. So I'm going to call a 34-24 Colorado win.
That's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guests, Andrew Haubner, Sean Naa, and Xavier Guillory. This game will kick off at 3:30 p.m. Arizona time. TV is going to be on the Pac-12 network.
Uniforms. I know they're wearing the glow in the darks. Do we have any intel on how that's going to happen? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Stay tuned to the uniformity column drop on Thursday, 7 p.m. for more info on that. Yeah, that was interesting. And so maybe, I don't know, in the tunnel or something, they can get a little creative. Or
do we build like a big community blanket that goes over the top of the stadium for a short bit of time? Like, how they have things like halftime shows where fans all have like a little card or whatever they hold, so that they form like a big thing in the stands. Or we're going to see some audience participation. Stay tuned to see.
Yeah, or go to triple overtime or something. The sun sets about 6:30-ish. No, I don't know. Anyway, we'll see.
Innovate. This is where the innovating needs to come.
Exactly. Yes, innovate some solution. So yeah, it should be. They'll be in black jerseys at 3:30 on a day that's going to be 100 degrees. So that game will be kicking off again 3:30. Pac-12 Network's going to be on TV. So if you're local, be sure you're in the stands, because Pac-12 Network is not available to you probably. Anyway, stay with us on the social media side of things. We'll be doing a lot of stuff as we usually do. It is a game week, even with the bye week coming up. Still a lot going on here. So you can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils, Facebook and YouTube as well. And give me a follow on the social media stuff at bdenny29.
And you can follow me on that same stuff at Joe Healy 42. Once again, a huge shout out and big time thank you to all of our sponsors, of course, including Sun Devil Family Charities a 501c3 nonprofit organization created primarily for the purpose of raising funds to provide financial assistance to Arizona State University alumni, students, staff, and immediate family members adversely affected by medical issues. Monetary donations are always appreciated and go to support those in need due to unexpected medical conditions. They also have volunteer and sponsorship opportunities available that you can learn about on their website. And for all of you cornhole enthusiasts, it is coming up Saturday, October 14th. That would be next weekend. It's ASU's bye week, so no game to conflict with this event. The Sun Devil Family Charities presents its Fall Fling at the Mile, a fundraiser cornhole tournament at 100 Mile Brewing Company, not too far from Mountain America Stadium near Scottsdale Road and the 202. All buy-ins get food and drink tickets. The winning team in the competitive division takes home some good old-fashioned cash money, and proceeds for this fundraiser, of course, benefit Sun Devil Family Charities. I believe you can still register online. I checked that a little bit earlier today to register for the Fall Fling at the Mile, and of course, to learn more about Sun Devil Family Charities and other ways you can support them. Be sure to check them out online at sundevilfamily.org, and also give them a follow on Instagram at sundevilfam and on Twitter at sundevil_family.
So once you're done and supporting our amazing sponsors, drop us a 5-star review at the podcast platform of your choice. Tell a friend to dial in, and we'll, of course, be on Arizona's Family Sports Network every Thursday evening, 7:30 p.m., and a game day re-air at 10 a.m. Joe and I will be back next week, perhaps with a few friends in studios. We're going to be handing out some mid-season report cards.